Hello and welcome to Greater Good Entrepreneur. I'm Jim Verzino. We're here today with Milk Money and their founders, Louisa Schibli and Janice Shade. And Janice, why don't you start us off by telling us how Milk Money got started?
Well, it all kind of started back when I started my first company called True Body Products back in 2008. If you remember 2008, particularly the fall of 2008 was when I was launching my first financial campaigns to get the company up and running. And that was kind of a really bad time to try and raise capital as the Great Recession was starting to really get up and running. But, I had the company going. I was ready to get started, and I needed to raise capital.
When you're talking about the company, are we referring to Milk Money or a company that you had before Milk Money?
The company that I had before Milk Money, it was called True Body Products.
Okay.
It was a natural soap company that my mission was to make natural products that were affordable. My background is all in consumer products. I got my start at Procter & Gamble. I worked at Welch's, and Seventh Generation is what brought me up to here to Vermont. So I knew a lot about how to start and run brands and grow brands. And so I thought I'd try my own with this social mission of making natural products that were affordable. So I got my business plan together, got ready to go out and start raising some capital. And, I kind of had this idea in my mind that at the time I was calling my Million Moms idea, because I thought, a million moms out there in the country would love to have my soap for their family, something good, healthy for their family that doesn't cost a lot. And what if each of them could give me $1, invest $1, and then they could be investing in a mom entrepreneur. I'd have the money that I needed to get the company up and running, and it would make this great story about getting the company up and running. And when I ran this idea past my financial advisor and my attorney, they said, no, can't do that, not legal. This is way back in the days before Kickstarter was, even a twinkle in anybody's eye. So I said, this is how you raise capital. You go out, you raise money from angel investors and venture capital funds, and that's how you do it. So I went down that path. I raised almost $1 million for the company, got it up and running. It was growing, but I was spending all my time raising money pretty much because it was that, partly because of just getting started in the recessionary times, but it's just raising capital takes a lot of time. And I never lost this idea of the lots of little investments from a lot of people instead of trying to go out and get that one big check from the big angel investor. And I tried along the way. I tried to do this thing I called community supported enterprise, where it was a legal version of doing crowdfunding, where I was trying to pre-sell my soap, and so people would just pre-buy pay me for soap that would get delivered later. And it was a great idea in theory.
So kind of like a CSA, but basically you did
Exactly.
it for soaps and lotions and things like that.
Exactly. So
Okay.
yeah, in fact, I called it a CSE for Community Supported Enterprise because I wasn't agriculture like the CSA.
Right.
I thought so.
I started this. I tried to do this CSE. And got some good press on it, got some good traction on it, but kind of when it really comes down to it, my soap, like I mentioned, it was a low-priced soap. It was not real expensive soap. So for people to pre-buy enough in quantities that I needed to get the kind of capital I need, that they'd have to load up their whole garage full of soap. So kind of in practice, it didn't really do what I wanted it to do. But the silver lining out of it was how I met Louisa.
Okay.
Well, there was an article in the Free Press about Janice. Actually, it was a front cover of which section, the Entrepreneur Innovate section, and you had your little beanie cap on there because you were in the manufacturing room or something. And basically, I started reading it, and I saw the CSE explained, and I thought it was just the coolest thing. And at the time, I was doing a blog website called Moogle Vermont, which would highlight cool Vermont stuff. And so I picked up the phone and I just called her, and I was so intrigued by your story and the article and the CSE. And I wanted to do a Moogle entry on her, which basically meant that I was just taking True Body soap and I was talking cool it was in educating Vermonters and people who were interested in coming to Vermont of all these cool different Vermont companies. And one of them was True Body. So we talked for like an hour, and then we ended up meeting, I don't know, I think it was like a week or two later. And that's now coming up. We're 4.5 years, I think, since that first phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And when we met, we had the same like passion for Vermont, loved the whole crowdfunding, and our backgrounds were different, and they sort of melded together, and we knew we were going to one day go into business together.
So the precursor to Milk Money was a idea for a CSE, a blog about Vermont entrepreneurs and Vermont businesses. Then you guys met, and then always with the idea of small investment for local entrepreneurs. Is that the idea?
Yeah. So that's the idea that we kind of always talked about, was this idea of Vermonters supporting Vermonters, and especially doing it through small investment amounts. You know, over the years, even starting when I worked at Seventh Generation, people would come to me and say, "I love this company. I love what you're doing. I'd love to invest in what you're doing and be a part of it. You know, but I can't give you $25,000. Maybe I can give you $2,500." And the answer I always had to give back to them was, if you're not an accredited investor, I'm sorry, I can't take your investment. It just wasn't. It wasn't legal to do that.
Right. Okay. Why don't we back up a little bit now? So let's tell us about what Milk Money does specifically, and how that particular conversation plays into what Milk Money does now. Let's back it up just one step, if we could.
Yeah. So really, where Milk Money kind of came together was 2 years ago in the summer of 2014. I had already shut down my company, and that's a long, sad story we can save for another day, why I had to shut down the company after the venture capital fund basically pulled out. So I was doing some work as a contract CFO for a company in Burlington that was having similar experiences to what I had had, where she had lots of friends coming to her and saying, "I'd love to invest in your company," but they weren't accredited investors. And I learned that summer about some changes to the Vermont regulation that allows for crowdfunding.
And Louisa, what are so these are changes in laws, Louisa. What kind of laws changed, and was it a Vermont thing or was it a federal thing? Because I know right around that time there was
It's actually just the regulation that changed. They updated the regulation because the Vermont Small Business Offering actually already existed, and Ben & Jerry's used it in the 80s. And they basically went around to Vermonters, face to face, basically selling shares back in the 80s. So in 2014, it was a regulation that basically updated, that allowed for online and platforms and things to basically come into the modern age of being able to actually solicit from Vermonters.
So before the federal government did it, we already had a law allowing local people to invest in local businesses. So that existed before anything happened on a federal level.
Right.
Okay.
It actually started, there was a version of this back in the 1980s that Ben & Jerry's used to raise, they raised over $750,000 in 1984 from just everyday Vermonters, from I think it was 1,800 investors, in amounts as little as $126. So that was the precursor of what we have today. So a lot of the changes that were made to the regulation 2 years ago was really just to bring those regulations into the 21st century and make room for things like the internet and social media, stuff like that didn't exist back when Ben & Jerry's did this in the 1980s.
Okay, so so Ben & Jerry's, they kind of went around and just collected money from individuals, and people don't really do that anymore. Is that sort of where you guys come in, is you kind of create a platform for people to put the money in? How does that work?
Exactly, because while the regulation made it possible to do it, it's still kind of hard. How do you go around and collect small amounts of money from lots of different people? And that's kind of where this idea came from. As I was working with a company who was thinking of doing this, and we'd have to create a whole new web page for her and do all the legal work behind it. And I said, why don't Louisa and I do this? This is what we've been talking about for the last 4 years. We can create the platform where entrepreneurs can post their campaigns. Potential investors can come and look at those campaigns, review them, meet the entrepreneurs, and then make the investment. So we're really just the meeting place between the business owners and the investors.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Louisa.
I'm going to say that, and in addition to that, obviously, because this regulation is new and it's being back in the spotlight, we also have taken on the role of educating Vermonters that they can do this now, and the importance of investing locally and the effects it has on our economy.
Okay. So this is a Vermont only thing, other states. So if I happen to live in North Carolina, or I don't know, I used to live in Massachusetts. Can Massachusetts people invest in Massachusetts businesses, or is this a Vermont specific law?
This is a Vermont specific law, but there are other states that have specific laws for those particular states. One of the most notable is Oregon. They put some similar regulations in place, and there is a similar type organization to Milk Money in Oregon called Hatch, and they do kind of the same thing and facilitate the investments out there. So there are, I think there are upwards of 25, maybe even 29 states that have regulations like this on the books, but not many of them have organizations like Milk Money or Hatch that are facilitating it and making it doable.
Okay, so how does Milk Money facilitate this activity? What do you guys do that didn't exist in the marketplace before? What do you guys do that makes this all work?
One is the platform. There was no website that basically had a place where a Vermonter could just go, log in, prove that they're a Vermonter, and actually see, wow, all these companies are looking for investments from Vermonters. So there wasn't one place. So we've met a lot of people who want to be investing their money. They might not be accredited. They might only have $2,000 that they want to invest, but they didn't know where to go to find it, and they didn't even know that many people didn't even know they weren't allowed to do it. But now they are allowed to do it, but there wasn't a place to be able to find where the deals are, where the investments are. So we're that platform that basically brings together the entrepreneurs and the investors, and we help both sides along the way in terms of facilitation. So helping the entrepreneur get to the point where they have their documents, we can go into more detail. And on the other side, basically helping to make it as easy as possible for the investor to understand what they're reading and how to facilitate it. Yeah.
Okay, so basically you guys provide kind of the website where I can go, and if I say, I know I want to invest in a local company, I've got $5,000 I want to do that with, I can go to your website, look at the various Vermont companies that I might want to invest in and make a choice there. Or if I know that there's a company I want to invest in, if they're on your platform, that's actually how I go and give the money.
Exactly.
I go to your website, log in, create a login, and plop down some money. Okay, I want to come back. In a few minutes, I want to come back to sort of how it would work for an investor specifically and an entrepreneur real quickly. But before I do that, let's go back to your story a little bit. So you guys are each independently, and Louisa, you have kids? You do?
I have three.
Mm-hmm. Living at home?
I have 17, 19, and 21. So the last one is a senior in high school.
Okay. So oh, wow. That's exciting. So you're going to be an empty nester soon. And Janice?
I have 10 and 13 years old, so both in middle school.
Okay. So you're both already busy people, right? And I'm guessing, just like the entrepreneurs that you work with, you're starting a business. What is the sort of one thing that if you guys had to say as business owners, what's the one thing, if it's time, if it's regulation, what's the one thing that you see that's sort of the big challenge in taking your business, really, because your business is dependent on entrepreneurs and investors actually getting into the marketplace. What's the big challenge right now in sort of getting this thing off the ground?
Well, I would
educating
say
Vermonters.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Educating
Investors.
Vermonters.
Educating investors.
Yes. We have no shortage of entrepreneurs coming to us, and we've done little to no outreach to investors or to entrepreneurs other than just kind of putting our name out there, and they're finding us. As we like to joke, we've got money in our name, so entrepreneurs are finding us. Right. And we are meeting the coolest people doing phenomenal things with their businesses. So that side of our business is really humming. what's going to make this really work is whether or not Vermonters will step up and write a check and invest in some of these really cool companies. It won't work if the investors don't show up and write a check.
Okay, well, I know from other areas that I've worked in that sort of educating an entire marketplace is a pretty long-term thing, especially educating people on how to invest in a new way, right? That's just a real challenging thing. What kind of runway do you think you need to sort of get that going, to get people understanding, oh, I can go and invest $3,000 or $4,000?
Yeah, it's gonna take a while. Which is why we started doing this before we ever had campaigns even up on the site. So we started doing what we call our Invest Local series, where we are literally on the road. Louisa and I are a road show, getting all around Vermont. We've gone everywhere from Bennington to Norwich, Greensboro, Middlebury, kind of everywhere in between. And we're trying to hit as many locations as possible to just get out there and let people come in and learn about how local investing works in general, and then also meet some of the entrepreneurs that at the time they were just entrepreneurs who were thinking about doing a campaign or working on getting a campaign up on Milk Money. Now that we have some up on the site, they'll be able to actually meet entrepreneurs who are trying to raise capital. So that's one thing that we've been doing, is just getting out there into the communities and meeting people in person, because we think that piece is important. This is a big deal. People work hard for their money, and they're not going to just, we don't want them to just, take a flyer and write a check to somebody. We want them to really believe in what they're investing in and know what they're investing in and understand the risks and the possible rewards. So it's going to take a lot more of this road show, driving around the state, and we're working on other ways to get the word out. And now that we have campaigns up, we think that educational piece will come on a lot faster.
Okay, and Janice, how do you actually make money? Who pays Milk Money in this transaction?
The entrepreneurs do. So the way we're set up, we get paid a flat fee from the entrepreneur up front for the use of our platform, for the use of all of our legal documents that we have gotten lots of different samples from attorneys to get the ball rolling, for access to us for our time to help them get their campaigns ready to go, as well as a lot of time that Louisa spends with them on their marketing plan for how they're going to do their outreach to potential investors. So entrepreneurs pay that fee up front. And then one thing that we're actually starting to do now is we are implementing a usage fee of the platform. Once the entrepreneurs have their campaigns live, they will pay, just a small monthly fee while their campaign is live on the site. We do not take any percentage of any of the money that they raise. All the money that an entrepreneur raises is theirs to put into their business, and we don't get any payments from investors. We're actually not allowed to. So
Louisa, if I were to come to you and say, I'm interested in using your platform, how long would it take? So let's say we get all the way to the point that I write you a check for whatever that is for you to help me do that. How long would it take from the time that I want to do it until the time that I'm probably ready? Because it sounds like there's a whole plan that needs to go into place. What happens there?
Being the entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yeah, you being the entrepreneur.
Yes. Assume that I'm the entrepreneur and I come to you and I say, I want to use Milk Money to help to allow Vermonters to invest in my company.
So first, Janice and I, we do an intake call. Usually we spend an hour. We try to do it online or we meet in person, and we get to know the entrepreneur, their story, what they need the money for, how much they think they need, and so on. We usually sign an NDA, look at their business plan, and then together, Janice and I separately, we do what we call as a readiness assessment, a recommendation, to basically cover all these different points. We look at their marketing, their business plan, their team bandwidth, their product, their brand identity. We have 10 different things, production, and so on. And we make a decision. We rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. They'll get a number out of 100, and anybody 80 and above, we deem as, milk money worthy. We also, one of the categories is how compelling they are for Vermonters to be interested in investing.
So you do sort of this readiness assessment, essentially. So you might come back to me and say, Jim, you're only a 65. You don't have whatever these 5 things are that are needed. Maybe my production facilities aren't up to snuff, or whatever else it might be. Maybe I'm not ready yet. And you're going to come back to me and say, do these 10 things, and then maybe in 2 months or 6 months, then maybe at that point you're going to be ready.
Exactly. We'll give you ideas. You should go talk to this person, or you might want to do this. We give feedback on why we scored you lower than than you might have thought you'd be scored. Right. And those who then pass, we then say the next step is what you could do is you could either go right into signing a contract with us, or they can take sort of a smaller step, which is filling out a solicitation of interest that gets filed with the Department of Financial Regulation, the DFR, that allows them to what they call test the waters, to go out to events that Janice and I have, these Invest Locals series, and an entrepreneur can actually set up a table, and Vermonters can come in and talk to the company, the entrepreneur, and they can sort of get a sense whether or not Vermonters might be interested in investing. And that's a good way for them it's $250 to basically spend a little bit of money, have access to our events, and be allowed to actually go to Vermonters and say, well, we're looking at possibly doing a VSBO, which is the name of the Vermont Small Business Offering Exemption that they're all using. Milk Money campaign, on the Milk Money website.
Right. And
then they could then go to sign a contract. So that's a sort of a slower way. We've had a handful who've done the solicitation of interest and who haven't gone any further, and who may still come back to us in 6 months or to a year, but they sort of get a feel for what it's about and the interest from other Vermonters. And then those who sign a contract, sorry, go ahead.
I was just wondering about, has there ever been demand or interest in the service of just the assessment to see if, am I investment ready and what would it take? I would think actually there'd be value just in knowing that. Like, that's a service I can imagine someone wanting to buy even without the rest of it, to tell you the truth.
Well, there's a business idea.
Right.
So far,
True enough.
So far, we've been offering that for free. That first hour and that readiness assessment is for free.
And we have gotten feedback from folks that a lot of times they're not surprised at the things that we maybe score them a little bit lower on. It's usually stuff that they know about anyways. But we've gotten some great feedback that people find that you're right, that readiness assessment in and of itself is just a really helpful thing.
So you feel like you can do that readiness assessment in a few hours. Okay, so they're not showing you. You're basically taking them at their word on their books, probably, in a lot of things there. Then that's not an audited thing, but
we do look at their business plan. We can't fill out the full readiness without actually looking at their business plan.
Right.
So we are getting financials in the business plan. Yeah.
Right. But that's a pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you go through this process. They are ready. Okay. They're better than an 8 out of 10. They're ready to go. What happens now?
Jess?
Then they usually at that point they sign the contract and we go into full-on campaign planning mode, that's when we really dig deep into their business plan, and especially the financials are the piece that always seems to need the most work. And we start working with them to get all of the information necessary to put into their offering memorandum, which is that's the document that you as an entrepreneur would put out for potential investors to be able to read through. It gives all the information an investor would need to be able to make a decision. So it's got not just the business plan and the financials, but also all of the terms of the deal that the entrepreneur is offering, whether they're offering preferred stock or convertible debt or a royalty agreement. All of that is contained in this offering memorandum that before an investor can ever see it, we have to get that all put together and sent off to the Department of Financial Regulation for its kind of stamp of approval before we can show it up on our website. So that's the next big phase, is getting that offering memorandum done. And kind of concurrently, once the offering memorandum is pretty far along, Louisa and I start working on the pieces that are going to go up onto their their page on the website. We highly suggest that they put a short video, like a 45 to 90-second video, up on their page, just about their company in general, because this is where they get to shine.
So given that this is, even though Ben and Jerry's did it, I don't know how many years ago, was that the 80s that the Ben and Jerry's did their thing?
1984.
That was the 80s? Okay. But even though they did that in the 80s and the laws have been around for a long time, this is the first time it sounds like this idea is really scaling. I'm wondering, what do they call it? DFR, Department of Financial Regulation? Is the DFR still trying to find their way in, when you bring this stack of papers to the DFR, are they still trying to find their way in what's acceptable and what's not? Or is it pretty straightforward at this point where you know if you bring these documents that say these things, you can make it work?
We're getting there. And there's still, we've filed 3 campaigns with them so far and gotten all 3 of them approved, but none of them has sailed right through the process and got the approval on the first go around. There's always comments that come back, which is actually, it's kind of, I remember the first set of comments we got, it's like, wow, this is great. They really are reading these things. And they're reading it from the standpoint of, investor protection.
Right.
So they really make sure that what's in there is what an investor will need to make a decision and that it's understandable and approachable.
Right. Okay. Cool. So how long does it take from the time you send something into the DFR for them to turn it around? Is it a couple of weeks or is it a few months?
They have 15 business days.
Oh, that's pretty quick.
15 business days. They have to then they give us a response within the 15 business days. Then it takes us whatever time to make the amendments, resubmit it, and technically they have an additional 15 days. But so far they've been great and come back. If the changes aren't a lot, they've come back sooner than the 15 days. Okay.
So you guys have, and how long does it take? So let's assume that the entrepreneur has passed your readiness test. They're an 85 out of 100. How long does it take to get all the stuff ready to send to DFR? Does that take a few weeks?
Depends a lot on the entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah.
Assuming they're responsive enough to really move it along. Let's say it's pretty high on their priority list. How many are they going to have to spend? 2 or 3 weeks full time, or do they just need to have their accountant put a bunch of stuff together and they're ready to go?
Yeah, a lot of it does come down to the status of their financials. And those that make it through the system faster are those folks who we're finding actually, have a good base level knowledge of the financials of their business. Those that don't and have to farm it out to a CPA or a bookkeeper or whatever, it takes a lot longer to do. So that's something that we're starting to learn along the way is that it's something that we're starting to probe on a lot more before we do this readiness assessment, is to gauge the financial literacy of the various entrepreneurs. And if they don't have it themselves, do they have someone on their team that can fill that gap for them? Because that is going to make things move a lot faster. Okay. And we might end up in the future actually doing some sidebar courses on gaining basic financial literacy for entrepreneurs, because it's important.
Actually, that's kind of what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you and your business models. There's so many so many interesting other services that can be offered here, because your business, how long has Milk Money sort of been around as an entity? I know you've only recently taken on your first couple of clients, so.
Just over a year.
Okay, yeah. So you're a very young business yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to look out a few years, how many, I'm going to ask it in terms of campaigns. You tell me if that's the wrong metric, okay? But the metric that I'm thinking of right now is, how many campaigns is it going to take before you're ready to say, okay, we are an up and running business now, right? We're paying ourselves a real salary, and however you define, the fact that you're a real up and running business, and money's coming in, money's going out, and things are working on their own, because I'm guessing right now you're putting in more time than you're getting paid for, and that's just part of the journey. But what's it gonna take when you feel like you're fully functional? How many? Either you can answer it in number of campaigns, or whatever metric you're using to set your own goals.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how we've looked at it when we do our own financial modeling, because we're entrepreneurs too, and we have to do our own cash flow projections and all that. Kind of where we really hit and exceed the break-even point is when we are starting to upload 2 campaigns a month. So 24 campaigns in a year.
Wow. Okay.
That then also we do also offer services after a campaign is successful. We can be engaged for investor relations management, which we define as doing quarterly reports for the entrepreneurs out to their investors, helping to do an annual meeting if necessary, and kind of being the front line of communication and kind of the filter for communication from investors back to the entrepreneur. So if investors have questions or something like that, they'll come through us first and we can filter it. So that's where we really see our long-term revenue stream coming from, is that ongoing relationship building that we help with between the entrepreneur and their investors, and helping to manage that. So if we can get to a steady stream of 2024 new campaigns per year, and a good chunk of those, about 50 to 75% of those campaigns then engaging us to help them continue the relationship building, at least for the first year or two after the campaign, Milk Money is viable from a break-even financial standpoint.
Louisa?
And I was just going to add to the investor relations that that's a monthly fee. And the entrepreneur can pick which aspects they would like us to do for the investor relations. I mean, it can be everything to just part of it, to just organizing, a yearly annual party, whatever. But that's sort of an ad hoc thing that they can decide to what price range and what they don't have the time to do themselves. Right.
So do most campaigns, do you imagine, are they going to be kind of open-ended, or does every campaign have, we want to be up there until we raise $500,000 or whatever the number is? Are they finite in their amount they're trying to raise, or can some just be out there for a year and they're just hanging around out there whenever they can get people to pop in? Do you define that for your clients, and how does that work?
Actually, the DFR has rules around that. So they, before they even post their campaign, they have to state their offering, their campaign amounts, and they have 12 months to raise that amount, and they are allowed an extension on that 12 months if they need to, but they have to alert the DFR that they are going for that extension. What we're advising clients and what we're working towards is a much more condensed campaign. 12 months is a long time for a campaign to sit up there. It's our thinking it'll get stale, kind of like a house that's been on the market for a year. We really want our entrepreneurs to be thinking about a 3 to 6 month campaign where they really put some effort into it. Even before the campaign launches, if they do this solicitation of interest that Louisa mentioned, they can be out there kind of pre-populating their campaign with people who are going to be the early adopters and show that traction, so that they can try to close the deal within 3 months.
Right. Okay, so for our listeners and for our listeners and viewers, I want to define a multi-sided marketplace, because really what you've got is a multi-sided marketplace, right? You've got the entrepreneurs that need to be in there, and you've got the investors that need to be in there, and you're the ones in the middle making it happen. So other multi-sided marketplaces would be things like Airbnb and Uber, and there's several others out there, but that term multi-sided marketplace, not everybody knows it. But what I'm hearing is you are at the center of a multi-sided marketplace in a place where it sounds like people want to invest in local businesses, but they still need to be educated in just how it all sort of works. And educated and be like, what does it really mean to be an investor? What are you really doing? When do you actually get your money back? I mean, there's got to be 1,000 questions there. So the education piece of this on the investor side of the marketplace, now I can see why it's such a big thing to do, because if you're running 24, I mean, I'm just completely making these numbers up, but let's just say for the sake of fun, 24 campaigns in a year, each of them trying to get $100,000. Is that $10.2 million? I think it is. So that's a fair amount of money to raise. Is that $10.2 million? Yeah. Which one of you guys is like the marketing person? I'm just sort of making this assumption that one of you guys is the marketing genius and the other one is the financial genius. I actually have no idea if that's true, but
I'd say that, well, she's definitely the financing, but
okay.
But the one thing to make clear is that it's not up to Janice and myself to go raise that money. Each company, each entrepreneur also say that they also are burdening the responsibility of alerting their customers, their clients, that they are looking to raise money. We can bring people to the platform. We can educate Vermonters, and we can do, tweets and Facebook things here and there for each entrepreneur. Right. And we've every once in a while to an event for the entrepreneur. But really, the entrepreneur still has a responsibility to bring traction and investors to their page too.
Right.
It does not. Yeah.
So they need to really take the responsibility to bringing people to it in the same way that one would if it was Indiegogo or Kickstarter, although it's different because you're probably doing equity and lending financing rather than a Kickstarter or a Indiegogo, which is people put money into that, but they never expect really anything back other than maybe a little gift or something.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's rewards-based. We are not rewards-based.
Right. Okay.
But in a similar fashion to Kickstarter and Indiegogo, their marketing plan is to bring the general audience to the site. Then for the campaigns, it's their responsibility to attract the attention and close the deal. Yeah.
Exactly. And actually, that's funny. I was just talking to someone today who's asked me to help. She's starting a socially conscious business, and she's asked me to help her work on her. She's not sure if she's going to use Kickstarter or Indiegogo yet, and she was ready to, or the initial discussion was, I'd like this thing up, and I want to put this up there so that in 20 or 30 days, I've got $10,000 to get going, or $20,000, or it was a decent sized number, and my first question was, how big is your list? And what other contacts do you have in the industry that have influence that can drive people to the campaign? And nothing. So, the whole piece of that around getting attention to your, I'll use the term campaign for this, but I'm not sure what term you use with your entrepreneur clients, right? If you can nail that part, it seems like the rest of it will come together. If you can get enough qualified people looking at your thing that is the right audience, because I would imagine the audience for somebody that makes yarn is going to be potentially a completely different audience from someone that makes a food product, for instance. Potentially.
Right.
Potentially, but they could also live in the same community and they want to invest locally in their community.
Right.
So maybe the companies are both located in the community, and that's what's important to the investors, that they're investing in their community, whether it's yarn or food or whatever.
Right. So is it is it up to the entrepreneur to define how the investment is either going to be used or how they're going to get paid back, or is that part of? I would imagine that has to go to the DFR. I'm really not getting into your entrepreneurial story at all. I'm sorry. I'm just so fascinated by this subject matter that I'm really not spending a whole lot of time on sort of what you did before this and your life and your kids and all that. But I think other entrepreneurs that are in this call or in this in the audience would be similarly interested in. So.
Well, yeah, so that's a big part of what you were just saying there.
I forgot my question even now because what was I starting to ask before I distracted myself with apologies?
Do they have to define what they're going to use the money for?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Right.
All of that. Yeah. Yes, they have to. That is a definite requirement of the DFR, and that's all of what goes into that offering memorandum. So it'll talk all about the terms of the deal. If you are offering preferred stock, it'll talk about what what percent dividend and when does the dividend get paid and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing a royalty agreement, what are all the terms around the royalty agreement when, and it'll have all those details in the offering memorandum. And we help the entrepreneur. That's one of the early things that we talk with them about during that intake session, because their long-term plans for the company have a very important part to play in determining what type of security or what they're going to offer to investors. If it's the kind of company that it's been around for a while and it's going gangbusters and they just need a little bit more money to get them over the hump, and then they're going to sell off to Procter and Gamble or something like that. That's a very different investment scenario from a company that is also growing, but maybe wants to grow more organically, and maybe someday sell. The owner will sell to his employees, or she will, sell it to her family. That's a very different investment scenario, and there's still ways for investors to get their return on investment, but it's just not. It's not the same as when you just are waiting for that big payday when a company sells out. So that's a lot of what we help entrepreneurs think through at the very beginning, so that they can make the right decisions on what they're offering to investors.
Okay, so there's so many different steps and pieces in this investor piece. It sounds like there's so many more pieces that we need to do. I do know, Louisa, we did talk about potentially doing a master class where we can educate investors more about how this works.
That would be great.
Okay, so we're going to need to cut this one off right now, I'm afraid. But for those watching in TV land, we are going to be doing a course actually where we're going to talk much more in depth about how does a Vermonter invest in a local business. How do we get our money in there? How do we get our money back out? Is it a loan? Do we wait for the company to sell? There's all kinds of pieces to that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a separate masterclass with Milk Money. And we're actually going to spend a more structured amount of time talking about how do Vermonters invest in Vermont companies. How does the money go in? How do you get it back out? All these pieces. Until then, that's Greater Good Entrepreneur. We look forward to seeing you next time.